All right. There were a number of developer updates this month. Azure had two components that had vulnerabilities in them, the Azure Monitor agent and the Service Fabric. Both of those should auto update unless you have specifically disabled auto update features within your Azure instance. So that will be, the key there is if you're having those components auto update, you're good. If you don't have those auto updating, if you've disabled that, there is steps that you would need to proceed to push that update out to those components. And then there were a number of Visual Studio CVEs, including 7 that were released through MITRE for Git. But the Visual Studio update is the update you need to apply to resolve all of the Visual Studio update vulnerabilities, including the 7 from Git this month. So your development teams have some things to take a look at, and your operations teams, depending on your configuration in Azure, may have some actions to take care of there as well.
Yeah, Chris, one thing I didn't list there actually was a fix for Visual Studio 2015. Apologize for that. It was listed at the very bottom of the list, but there was a fix. If you're still building you have to build some old software with an old version of Visual Studio, 2015 actually had a patch as well.
Got it. As I was going through that first news article, I missed one of the important ones. Todd's going to talk about this in the update as well, potentially, but I wanted to make sure to call out the fact that last month there was a known issue that was discovered shortly after people started doing the updates. For those of you who encountered the DHCP service stopping after the June update was applied, Microsoft did resolve that, and they released, this was the message that was released by the Windows Health notification system, if you're subscribed to that, showing the different server editions, the original KB and the resolved KB. So more confirmation, though, that that issue should be resolved. If you encountered the issue last month and you had to roll back, ideally, you would want to just make sure that you apply the OS update to some of those systems that were affected last month, check and make sure everything's good, and then continue to roll out. But the initial responses I've been seeing from patchmanagement.org as of today, people are acknowledging that this is fixed. Nobody is, raising their arm, right now saying, oh my God, nope, still not fixed or anything. So it looks good for the moment. But anybody who did encounter that issue, approach with a little bit more caution than normal, but you should be good to go. Just wanted to make sure to touch on that because I forgot to before. ESU support. So Windows 10 lifecycle, we are rapidly approaching October. If you don't already have a plan in place, and if you are expecting to have some Windows 10 server or systems go beyond the end of life date, October is the last security update unless you subscribe to ESU support. So make sure you've got your plans in place either to transition off of or continue support for Windows 10 past October. And just some details again we've been talking about this, most months here for the past several months, just making sure people are aware. But if you are using an Ivanti solution, you subscribe to the Microsoft ESU, and then you would contact us and get support in place for that. Again, there is a cost involved. It's an operational cost on our side. It's a fraction of what it is when you're paying Microsoft for the coverage. And we do try to scale that back with how many systems you're managing. So contact your account rep if you need to do ESU support and you're using one of our Ivanti patch management solutions to manage that. We can provide that content, but you do also have to subscribe to Microsoft. Their cost doubles every year. Ours stays consistent throughout, again, just because we need to cover the operational cost of maintaining the environments, doing the testing, and making that available to our customers. So long-term service channel, anybody on the LTSC, nothing near-term to be concerned about there. Looks like the extended support, mainstream support end, we had Server 2016 mainstream had ended. That's out to 2027 for extended support. And then Server 2019 1809 mainstream support ended in 2024, and the extended support is out to 2029. So a little ways out before any of those fully end of life. All right, Todd, over to you for the bulletins and releases.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Let's walk through what we saw yesterday. as far as releases go. Chris did mention that there were a number of updates for Creative Cloud and some of the applications that we cover in there. First of all, an important update for Adobe After Effects. They addressed two vulnerabilities in there. These are denial of service and a memory leak vulnerability. They only rated this one as important. And important to note here that all the Adobe releases I'm going to talk about, none of these have known exploits against them right now that are reported by Adobe that they're aware of. So just important to keep them up to date as your regular Creative Cloud suite update. Similarly, there was a denial of service update for the Adobe Edition application. Again, two versions supported, and most of these are 2024 and 2025 releases, by the way. I called out the specific version numbers. I pulled them out of the bulletins for everybody's use here, but usually they're their 2024 and 2025 releases. More importantly, there was an update for InCopy. It did address 3 critical vulnerabilities that allowed for, they call it arbitrary code execution. Again, important one from an Adobe InCopy standpoint. InDesign as well, a few more vulnerabilities. Again, 6 of them here called out that are critical. These all had to do with arbitrary code execution as well. And one thing you keep in mind, these updates are for both the Windows and the Mac OS versions that are out there. So important to keep those up to date. Adobe Illustrator, a common program used by a lot of us. 10 vulnerabilities in this particular release. I didn't list all the CVEs specifically. You can go in and take a look at those. They did lead to arbitrary code execution, denial of service, and a memory leak, as they call them out. 7 critical, 3 rated important. So those of you that are using Illustrator want to make sure that you update it as well. Getting into the updates for the operating system specifically from Microsoft yesterday, we did, of course, see the Windows 11 update that included Server 2025. Large number of vulnerabilities, 102 addressed yesterday. Despite that, as Chris said, none of them were known to be exploited or publicly disclosed, so we didn't have any 0 days there. But again, a large number, and a few of them are critical, as expected, which raises this up to a critical level. So you want to make sure you're updating your operating systems as well. Interestingly, no known reported issues across Windows 11 or Server 2025 this month. So that's nice to know. Windows 10, now fewer vulnerabilities than Windows 11 as it's approaching end of life. Maybe just a focus issue, but only 97, still a large number, of course, were addressed this month. Again, none of those known exploited or publicly disclosed either. As far as known issues, there was one reported. Now, this is interesting because I looked in the release notes from Microsoft, and they listed multiple versions of Windows 10 having issues, but actually looking at the KBs themselves, there was only one that was called out. And this is an issue we talked about last month. It was a font issue with the Chinese, Japanese, and Korean fonts being displayed properly. These came over from Google, by the way. These are Chromium-based fonts that were pulled in from the Chrome browser. Looks like Microsoft is kind of punting on this one. They said, yeah, if you have any issues with this, deal with Google. You can write to them on their GitHub repository notes if you want to comment on this. Their workaround for right now, and probably going to stay this way through the end of Windows 10, is increase your scaling so that they're displayed in a little bit larger capability, and they won't be quite so blurry. So it's kind of their workaround right now. This was resolved apparently in Windows 11, and this is the only one that they're calling out right now in Windows 10. Again, this is the 2021 releases and 22H2 releases, so be aware of that one. It's the only known issue, so not too many this month. Chris talked about SQL Server. I specifically highlighted here the publicly disclosed vulnerability 2025-49719. 2 other vulnerabilities were also addressed in this release, so there were 3. These are all the currently supported versions of SQL Server. So going back to 2016 Service Pack 3, we did talk about 2017, both the original release and the cumulative updates, 2019, and finally 2022. So again, these 3 vulnerabilities rated, the one obviously publicly disclosed, so it is a critical update this month if you're running any of these versions of SQL Server. No known reported issues, which is nice. We did see an update, of course, for SharePoint Server as well. 4 vulnerabilities addressed this month. Several of these allow remote code execution. One of them allowed for spoofing capabilities. The standard 3 we see every month, 2016, SharePoint Server 2019, and their subscription edition. So those are the 3 that are in active support. Usually a pretty straightforward update on SharePoint Server. No known issues this month as well.